Okay, hi everyone. This is Ron McKinney with Parida Photo. I'm here with Max Sirota and Lois Greenfield to do our latest webinar. Lois has been started as a photojournalist and has been doing photography for about 40 years. Did her first show in 1992 in New York, and since then has done shows all over the world. She's put out 3 books. We're going to be talking about some of her more recent images that she is nicknamed 1-to-1. With that in mind, I'm going to turn things over to Max for just a moment to introduce himself.
Cool. Hi. How's it going? Thanks for that intro, Ron. My name is Max from B&H. I'm part of the marketing team, and I'm a photographer as well. Very grateful to be part of this community, to be included in these webinars, and yeah, just delighted to be here today with Ron and especially with Lois.
Okay, and Lois, before you get started, I just want to remind everyone that we will be taking questions, throughout the webinar. So if you see any questions as she's going through each of the pictures, please post them in the chat channel. And when you do that, the default for doing a chat says all panelists. Be sure to change it, so it says all panelists and attendees, so everybody can see your questions. And then Max and I will get those over to Lois. So Lois, if you can just introduce yourself and talk about your dance photography for a minute.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you both for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be virtually with you, and always a pleasure to talk about photography. So my beginnings in photography started when I was about 14 years old, and I was on, I did a summer program on an Apache Indian reservation, which is what they called it at the time, doing community service work. And I had a little brownie camera and started to take pictures, and that fueled my fire for doing more of it. Dance was not on my to-do list, but in college I started doing photojournalism, and that was my basic career goal. I would have loved to have been a National Geographic photographer, for example. But I covered the riots and the rock stars of the early 70s in Boston. And that was it. What happened quite by chance was, of the many assignments I got, one was to cover dance events. And I found that I enjoyed that more than having to take a picture that would fit an editorial point of view. Not that I had a different editorial view than the magazines and newspapers I worked for, but I liked the fact that it could just be a beautiful picture and didn't have to tell a story. So I fell into dance, and that was in the early 70s. And I worked for the Village Voice for 20 years, once a week covering. And that was my education in dance too, by the way. And so it just, you just kind of fall in love with it, for better or for worse. At the same time, my allegiance was split between photography and dance, because most dance photographers shoot the actual moments of a dance, shoot the peak moments, and it was all about stilling time to represent a perfect moment. And that's the last thing I ever wanted to do, was catch a perfect moment. I wanted to catch something that was showing the passage of time, and that the moments I would shoot instinctively were not those peak moments that most people want, but a transitional moment that showed the flow of where they were going, where they had come from, where they were going. And of course, I wasn't really shooting a lot of ballet. I mean, I did, of course, as part of my work for the Village Voice and for all the companies that hired me, but my heart and soul were in improvisational work with dancers of, all different, I don't want to pigeonhole anyone in any category, but postmodern dance, I'll call it. So I don't have to go farther in case anyone has a question, or I can keep going on this topic.
No, we're good for now.
I think you can continue on, and then if you can, like one of the things I think we're really interested in is just, like how have things evolved over the years from the beginning to like what you're doing right now?
Well, they've evolved in many ways. I mean, I don't know if you want the technical things with developing film, or the fact, or just the way imagery has changed. I could, talk from my own experience. which is maybe not the answer to your question, but I was also doing commercial work, and a client wanted me to use a medium format camera. I had been using the early version of the DSLRs and all that. And so I brought in some dancers to help me experiment with this square format Hasselblad system camera, which I'm still using to this very day. And that's another interesting story.
Amazing.
But I found then by bringing dancers in, they started to improvise, and they were bounded by this square box, the frame. And it created a whole new aesthetic and point of view. So I'm like very discursive when I talk. I like go down different pathways. I probably lost the thread of exactly what you're asking about, but I wasn't approaching dance in the way other people did. I was definitely more interested in the dancer's expression, you know, because they're actually limited by choreography all the time. But if they came to my studio, we could try all kinds of split-second movements, which didn't require takeoff and landing and any kind of trajectory of movement. So, and they were all bounded in this square format, which was pretty exciting. It was pretty radical and pretty exciting. I'll leave it here because I don't know. I really don't know where I was going, and that's sort of part of my technique. I just go down roads and see where they lead me. And
well, you know, I think that's part of what's really interesting, because like one of the things that we were talking about the other day is that when you photograph dancers, you're not really looking for those peak moments that often many other dance photographers are looking for. You're looking for something that's in like a transition that you can only capture one time and nobody will ever really see again, because you know, you can always recapture, redo a peak moment, but those transitions, those are fleeting moments, and once they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah, and they're moments beneath human perception, which is incredible. You can only see them stilled as a photograph, so I don't see them when I'm taking it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's been my area, my subcutaneous area of interest. You know, where I am now with my one-to-one series, which is part of the Moving Still book. One-to-one is really just, it just connotes a direct encounter with the dancer. So when I have the exhibits, they're about 5 feet high, and it puts the viewer in direct contact with the picture, almost as though you're standing on, they're not on a stage, but you're standing, you're in their space, as opposed to looking at a picture, you know, framed on a wall, much smaller than you are. And it's more just the personal encounter with the dance and how it's happening before you by virtue of its size. So I brought in dancers that I had worked with. Some I've worked with since they were 14 years old, and others are blind dates from dancers who recommended people, and from a various range of styles, from Martha Graham to Alvin Ailey. And not that I privilege any particular company at all, but I really just look for people's willingness to put themselves out there and express themselves. So for the dancers, it's been fabulous because they're usually constrained by choreography, and I give them an opportunity to just create whatever they want, which is not something they can do on the stage. So it's very creative for them, and it's creative for me. Now, unlike most photographers who go in, like when I teach workshops at my studio, many of the photographers come with sketches and drawings, and they have a preconception of what they want the dancers to do, which is fine, but I don't. And I just want some miraculous moment to surface while the dancers are improvising. And yes, it's a collaboration because I'm feeding them stuff and they're giving me stuff. So, but they are expressing themselves in ways that they're not even allowed to do in professional circumstances because it's not choreography. And then, so in relationship to this specific series too, which I guess we'll be seeing some samples of, I have assistants throwing all kinds of things, scarves and feathers and birds and, you know, styrofoam balls. And it's really just like kindergarten. And I feel that I actually did skip kindergarten, and I've been making up for it ever since. And it's a very, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it seems like there's like definitely a sense of play and improvisation, and you're really freeing these dancers to do things that they haven't done before. So that sounds like a great environment. We actually have a couple of
And they can look
questions.
at the monitor. I mean, that's the other partner. It's a threesome because the monitor allows the dancers to see what they did and
Yeah.
make corrections, or I might make suggestions, which are usually about gestures and expressions, because I want the dancers not to just do a movement, but to show so that there's some alleged purpose in the movement. They're traveling someplace for some reason, either they're in a dream, whatever it is. I don't want a narrative, it's irrelevant, but I don't want them just to be, creating a shape. And yeah.
Interesting, that fine line between being a mannequin and then telling a story. It's like that in between where there's some depth, but there's also some mystery. I like that.
Mystery, absolutely. Because often, like, the pictures don't tell a story. So you would be reading whatever you want to read out of these pictures, which is nice. Yeah.
Nice. We have a couple of questions. I don't want to interrupt the flow, but let's see. Charles asks, who are your favorite dance photographers, Lois?
Oh.
And I think what's interesting about that is, like, when you first started doing dance, was there anyone who inspired you at the time, or because there weren't really a lot of people who did dance back in the 1980s and only did dance like there is now.
Right. Yes, I did have an inspiration and a little bit of a mentor, Max Waldman, who is a name that may not, ring bells for people.
Actually, David Cooper mentioned that on the chat. Max Waldman. Good guess.
Okay. Yeah. I was writing, as a journalist, I was also writing about photography, and I interviewed, Cortege, I interviewed Max Waldman, I interviewed Dwayne Michaels, who was a major influence. And yeah, I think, I'm trying to recall exactly. Yeah, he was a major influence. Now, okay, this is why, in part. I came in as a photographer and I entered the dance world. So that's two separate allegiances. And my allegiance really was to be to both. So I wanted to merge the photographer in me with the subject matter, which is dance, which I hadn't sought to do. I didn't want to be a dance photographer, as I mentioned, like probably 3 times already. So it's about forming a hybrid between the two art forms. Dance is an art form, photography is an art form, and I sought to merge it. And what Dwayne Michael did, as well as Max, was, he actually saturated his negatives with a lot of grain, and so the dancers looked like they were pushing through foggy situations, and it was very dramatic. And I thought, that's it. He's got photography, what he's doing with the grain, and he's got the dancers, Baryshnikov, Makarov, all these people, in his studio. And so I sought to make that. And I think for me, it ended up, this is not going to be readily understood, but through the black border of my square box was sort of that kind of collaboration.
Very cool. Got a few more questions. What conversation do you have with the dancers to get these spontaneous moments?
Oh, do anything. Just start anywhere. Yeah, I think, like for the latest series, I guess for the most part, I really just want them to be themselves. So I think rather than being the photographer who first of all intimidates the subject, because they're the photographer and they want it done a certain way, and so most people are probably shaking, they see it's a very loose situation. And well, some of them, have seen my book, so then they want to replicate those movements, which is not what I want to do 20 years after I shot that.
Right.
So we're just making them at home and saying, just start anywhere. Now, if they don't know where to start, we say, well, do you have any choreography you like? And then they should start with something that they feel comfortable if it's a piece of choreography. Or I always say, what music do you want to hear? Which is the last thing I want to do, is hear all this music and trying to shoot, but it's what they need. So I think because they feel at home and they just start moving. And we have, for this latest series, you know, a myriad of props, which I mentioned. And so we're handing them feathers, we're handing them styrofoam balls, or we're throwing fabric. I'm usually, by the way, spending 90% of my time throwing things, not my time, my assistant's time, throwing things, you know, I could be on ladders and things are coming down on them and they're getting caught up in fabrics or whatever. So it gives them something to play with too, because the dancers know choreography and know how their bodies move independent of choreography, but have no idea what it's gonna necessarily look like as a photo. So I'm giving them I'm making this up now because it seems logical. I'm giving them something to play with so they can create some kind of story rather than worry about what they're gonna be doing.
Nice. Yeah, definitely seems like you're catering to them, which makes them feel at home. And then there's that sense of play again that you mentioned. So that's great.
Yeah, I think we're both playing and having fun. Yeah.
That's always a good move. Have another question from Eric. How do you balance between giving them directing the dancers and letting the dancers express what they want? So is there a balance between that, or is it just kind of, you give them free license?
Well, I think it's sort of the same thing I just said, which is,
Yeah,
you know,
true.
I want them to feel at home. I tell them I have no fixed thing. Let's just start anywhere. I mean, sort of this is true of most things we do. You have to just start somewhere. You have to pick up a pencil before you write something. You know, you have to pick up a camera before you shoot. It's not like everything is just you launch it. So, yeah, it's really the same answers before. They feel comfortable if they are. And also I'm getting like dancers recommended by other dancers who know what I like, and they may have worked in the same dance company or whatever. So in a way, especially if they've seen my work over the years, they're already primed. And the only disadvantage of that is like, I said that I don't really want to do what I did 10 years ago. So yeah, I'm privileged to be working with dancers, and I owe them everything in terms of my photography, because whatever pictures I take without them, you know, what would they be?
Yeah.
Right. Max, before we go to any more questions, we've got a few more questions coming in. I actually want to start sprinkling in, you know, some of her pictures from One to One, and so we can talk about that, and then we can possibly bring in some more of these questions, or save some of them to the end. So please keep bringing in those questions. But for now, I am going to bring in, let's see, here we go. I'm going to bring in some of her pictures now.
Sounds good.
And here we go, Lois. And of course, we're going to start with this one with the mirrors. So can you talk a little bit about this image and your fascination with mirrors and how they work with you?
Since the very beginning of photography, for some reason, you know, I also did a lot of travel photography in Africa and whatnot. I mean, I was just always interested somehow in that reflection. These mirrors, which are security mirrors that they use in stores so people don't take things, you know, I collect these kind of things. And this moment, for example, is again totally improvised. And what I love about it, and what fascinates me about mirrors, is that it reflects off-screen space. So the camera can only register what is in front of it, but the mirrors can give you all the multiplicity of other angles and points of view collected in the mirror. And it also reminds me of, I think it's the Van Eyck and other Renaissance, or maybe I'm in the wrong era, other artists from the past who've incorporated mirrors. It just, yeah. It brings the inside out, the outside in, and it's not obvious. I mean, again, I'm never looking for something that's obvious. Although I don't think of it that way. It's something that should have a certain amount of mystery to it, or yeah, I'll leave it like that.
Okay, cool. You know, Max, I'm not able to see any comments that come in through the chat. So if anybody has any questions about these particular pictures, you know, feel free to share those. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to share about this one, Lois, before we move on to your next one?
Hard to say, really. I mean, I could go into a whole story. The dancer in front, Paul Zivkovich, I met when I was working on dance production in Australia. I was invited to co-create a dance that ended up touring the world, and it was called Held, and it was about photography. So that's no surprise. So I was actually on stage for many of the scenes, shooting the live action, which went up virtually simultaneously on 2 screens. So the audience could see the flow of the moment and then see the images, the moments I captured. And so that's how I met this Paul, and he's been one of my favorite collaborators ever since. And that was some hair-raising experience for a photographer to go on stage. And this was in like 2004. We opened at the Sydney Opera House. And the equipment, you know, seemed high tech at the time, but I'm basically tripping over all my cords and tripods. And being what I once was, which was, you know, newspaper photographer catching moments, but as opposed to the studio photographer, I tell the person exactly, oh, I didn't mention this before. I tell the person exactly where to stand, and we take measurements from the background to where my camera is sitting on its tripod, and they have to be there because I pre-focus. I don't use any automatic thing, and the pre-focusing on my V-System Hasselblad camera gives me the perfect timing that no other camera had ever given me. I mean, now things have caught up with that, obviously. But so I actually make the dancer, if not be in that specific spot, know that after 3 jumps or whatever, they're going to be in that spot.
Right.
So going back to Australia now, being on stage, I didn't quite have that leeway, but it was, I also did stroboscopic things that went up on stage. So it was very exciting.
Cool. We actually have a question about this image. Bob is asking what direction, if any, was given to create this image, or was it completely spontaneous? Because he loves the unstructured approach. So was there any direction?
No, you know, we just play with the stuff. So I probably took, you know, 50 pictures of it. That's for sure. But there was this, no, it just happened, you know, it's like hold the mirror a little this way, hold it a little this way, jump, you know. No, see, I like that I don't know. I have no idea what it's going to be. It's like a try, and that's my method, try anything. So that's they're great. Jumping around. I mean, often we switch the lights around too. I mean, because I have a very basic lighting system, which is one, it's a satellite, a Broncolor satellite soft, 3/4 frontal, and that's the key light. Obviously with a black background, I don't bother lighting with black lights. And otherwise I have gradations or white backgrounds or normal things. So, you know, sometimes we flip it around from side to side. I mean, I'm actually spending a lot of unconscious or conscious time on the lighting. I think the lighting is definitely at least as important as the movement, you know. And again, because I want the viewer to see the intention of the dancers. I mean, I want people to think there is an intention, there is a purpose, there is a narrative, even if they're not privy to it. So there's that mystery of what are these 2 guys doing jumping, and I don't know.
So do you have,
Give that to the viewer.
Do you have your own studio? Is that correct, Lois?
Yes, I've had different studios.
Okay, but and so you have one right now, and do you have it like set up like just specifically for dance, or like some of it is set up in black, some of it is set up in white, or?
Well, actually, at this point, I no longer have that, my last studio, but I have my equipment there and I shoot there.
Okay.
It's no longer my studio, but I rented to shoot there.
Right. That totally makes sense. Okay.
So yeah, I have tons of stuff. I mean, all kinds of, you know, stuff one accumulates after all these years. And it's a simple white background, which you see now on the screen. This was lit from behind and lit from the front. And just again, I can't even describe how I did it, because it was just about improvisation, where I say, oh, well, why don't you go behind the screen? Oh, well, let's put a light on the floor. And then, I mean, maybe someone had, you could sort of see.
What is the material you're using here?
It was just a white scrim. I honestly don't remember. It was some years ago. It was either a white background. I'm sorry, I'm speaking too quickly. I'm a New Yorker. It was obviously a white backdrop. It was lit from front and behind. Mm-hmm. So the light on the viewer's right is from a light that was probably on the floor, shining through. So it looks it's translucent. So, but I never had, so I think it was a white backdrop lit from behind. Yeah. You know,
yeah, that's a striking image.
All the fiddling around created something that, you just see it's working and you do it. It's not like I had a list of what to do. Mm-hmm. Or I had him press his head against the fabric so I see him more. I have him recess it. And I basically have them dancing. I mean, again, no one's really holding still at any point.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Is that just for this photo, or in general, you don't have many of your models standing still?
Oh, I don't want them standing still. No, I mean, that's the whole point. It's a different feeling when it's in transition.
Yeah.
It really is.
And they're professional movers.
They're professional, and the stasis of it is not, and actually, in some of my earlier work, I would always have people, I would take them either going up in the air or going down from the air, and that gave a completely different facial expression, and you could sort of tell by their hair, obviously, if it was going up or going down. But I would say that was a big component of that series of work. It was, because things are normally traveling across, but up and down, there's a different feeling in the movement. I mean, you can't change, even for any human, going up creates a certain expression, and going down creates another expression, maybe terror, but yeah, I never wanted anything in that still point. You were either traveling right, traveling left, going up, or going down. And of course, they're just standing there. But
well, speaking of going up and going down, here we go.
Okay, so this is the cover of the American edition of the Breaking Bounds book. The book, the picture we showed 2 frames ago was the British edition, foreign edition. So these are dancers I'd worked with before in terms of the dance companies they worked with that have hired me to shoot. And then I brought them in just to do our experimentation or whatever. And this was a challenge, this picture, because the 2 dancers were perfect. I told the downstage one to be lower. Their facial expressions are perfect. Their hand gestures are perfect because I've worked with them a lot. And they have that angelic quality that I think would befit a Baroque church or ceiling. Or, as I said, I really was inspired by Renaissance and Baroque art. You know, it's just subliminally that I incorporated it. But the problem taking this picture was the dancer, who looks great in this one, for 50 or 20 shots is holding up jazz hands. So everyone are angels flowing, we call it angel trio, and he's hailing a taxi cab. And so I couldn't use that picture, and I was getting so frustrated. And then finally, we got him to move his hand. And I guess, that is kind of a lesson for photographers, in a sense that you really have to, you can't just accept what the dancer or subject is going to give you. If it doesn't work for you, you have to, some people you just can't work with, because if they can't do it, they can't do it. But the photographer should never feel shy about telling them they don't want the hand held that way. They want a purpose to their face. They want a gesture that connotes something. They want, I think, in fact, this happens in my workshops a lot. They're afraid to, I'm standing there with them, so it's, we can get over that quickly. But they're often, they don't want to make the dancer feel badly that they're not doing something right. So, but then it's a loss to the whole picture. And frankly, the dancer is a performer. And without the benefit of a mirror, so he could see what he's doing, although we have the benefit of the monitor, which we run to constantly, and we could say, look what you look like. And they say, oh, I'm so glad I saw that, because they don't realize it. So that's something to work on. And then it's difficult, by the way, to get 3 people in one, the timing and all that. So
Yeah, I love the lines in
I
this
see
photo.
them
Just
moving to another picture.
I mean, I just love looking at all the lines created with all of the arms, the legs, the fabric. It's great. It really invites you in to explore it.
Mm-hmm.
And had you told them ahead of time because all this really is coordinated, their colors, so did you like tell them to bring this in, or is this all stuff that you have, or how did that work?
Well, it works both ways. In this case, the 2 dancers bring fabulous clothes all the time. So some have come with great wardrobes, and I have like boxes and bags and whatever, all kinds of, favorite things that I've accumulated over the years. And at least the 2 dancers worked in the same dance company and had worked with me before. So that makes it kind of easier. Yeah. Should we move to the one below this?
All right, we shall. Because this one is really fascinating.
Well, this one is an example, and I hope we show more of them, of the, quote, 1-to-1 series. And Peju Chenpat has actually danced with Martha Graham Company, which is a completely different style. And like many, was a blind date because she was recommended by someone else who I'd worked with. So, and I knew her style. The Martha Graham style is in no way connected to, what is allegedly my style. But anyway, I have accumulate all these props, feathers, and little glitter things. And I really just asked her, in this entire series, I just asked people to play around with the props, give them different props, and kind of be in your own space. There's nothing about projecting anything to an audience. Here, take my picture, or look what I look like. They should be in their own dream space, really. And I think that the end result is very dreamy of this whole series.
And it really is. One of the first questions that, any dance photographer would think of when they see this is, holy cow, you must have really like photoshopped, all those, those blue and turquoise and purple and white, petals into the shot for it to be framed just like that, because it just looks absolutely perfect, but that's not the case. You don't do a whole lot of retouching. And secondly, you had some assistants like tossing these, and it just all came together. It's amazing how everything comes together, including the dancer and her positions and the feather, the 2 feathers that she's holding. It's unbelievable. It's like that moment that is always going to get away from you, but you got it.
Yeah, well, I do take a lot of pictures. Yeah. And you could see, if you want to analyze it, you could see how this whirlwind happened, because the feathers she's holding are, you could see how she's kind of swept that up. But these are miracle moments. They're nothing, you can really plan on. They're nothing you have to expect. You need a lot of patience to get them. So, but it's fun. It's just total fun. And like, not everything works out. It's not like everything you try to do is going to work. But actually, usually just when we think we finished, we've got everything we can do, like one more thing happens, and that, starts a new thing. And I'll point out that this is now, in this 1-to-1 series, a 1 light situation. I have an overhead light, just a normal kind of thing that's put in the same place for the most part. So just has a different effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions over there, Max?
A lot of general questions. Let me just make sure that none of them are about this image. Let me see.
Why don't we jump in with a couple of general questions right now?
Okay, I have a queue, so I'll start from the top.
Okay.
So actually somebody asked the same question just a few minutes ago. So how much time do you usually spend creating with an individual or a group? Is there a general timeline? Because like you said, this one, there might be an extra moment and that kind of creates a whole new, like,
Yeah, that's a good question, because I would devote the day to it.
okay.
Totally. It's not like come in for 2 hours. Like I'll get nothing done in 2 hours, you know. And usually, again, by the end, it's really taken off. It's just like this one more thing, one more thing. And first of all, the dancers have to get used to the whole situation. Whether some of them I've worked with for so many years, it's nothing to get used to, but for others, there is. And again, they're worried about my expectations, and I have no expectations. But when they come in, they kind of want to please me and make sure they do something that, you know, I'm going to like. And, you know, very quickly they realize that it's all collaborative. But actually, you know, so I'm not looking to run to the next thing. This is not true of other aspects of my life, but in this aspect of my life, I'm extremely detail oriented, actually. So I will be changing a hand gesture, a facial gesture, we'll move the props. Just to make it all have that magical look.
So you're definitely in the moment. Yeah,
and
that's
again,
great.
I also have as many as 4 people if they're standing on ladders and throwing things down. In this case, I think it was just 2. But,
Okay. Actually,
this. Bring the dancer over to the monitor. I'm sorry, I interrupted. This, you know, is so important that the dancer should see what these pictures look like. So for all the photographers, you know, listening to this, you know, include them, collaborate. You know, they're not just your subject; they're your collaborators, and they're going to help make the picture happen because they know how to change their body position more than I. You know, I can't instruct anyone on body positions. So, you know, it has to come from them.
And when you're showing them the images, is that on your camera screen or is that a dedicated monitor?
Dedicated monitor.
Okay, yeah. I'm sure that really engages them and helps with the creative process.
Yeah, they go, oh my God, that's what I look like? Oh, my toe is like this. Oh my, this, you know, and they start, it kind of like really energizes them to, you know, because they're looking for a perfection I'm not looking for. Dancers kind of eat perfection, yeah.
Yeah, coming from 2 different avenues and meeting 2 different art forms.
And it also gives them, you know, they see something and then they see how they can build on it. So I highly recommend including the subject.
We have a couple more questions about this particular shot. How do you deal with the cleanup of glitter between shots? It gets everywhere. Anytime we have costumes with glitter, it's on everything.
Okay, well, this is, I'm calling it glitter, but they're probably, they're no bigger than an inch each.
Okay.
Which is different than other glitter, which is just, you're going to have it, you know, forever in every nook and cranny. And
right.
So these
more like confetti.
We sweep it up. Actually, could be every shot. We have to sweep it up because I can't leave it on the ground and then have them throw more in. So we kind of sweep up after every shot.
Yeah. Huh. There's another question about this and also relates to the last image as well. Do the dancers naturally know how to flow fabric? Or are there any specific movements you teach? Any tips on fabric choice?
Kind of depends on what you're going for there. The sheer fabrics, which against a white background will look very good. There are the shinier fabrics that will give more of a sense of billowing volume. So I do have a range of them. Some we always say are more talented. Some fabrics are more talented than others, and that as they, you know, if I have an assistant, one on each side, and we're throwing it up and it's coming down, there's an art form to the way it comes down. It's like you can't just like whack it in the air and expect it to look like a Baroque church ceiling, you know. So we actually spent a lot of time on that, and it's, I'd say 50% of the time we get a good result, and the other 50% time it isn't working. And by the way, we also use fans, one fan, which I doubt I used in this shot that we're looking at, because I couldn't have used the fan because it would have sent it on a different trajectory. The
Last
fan is
question about
a
this.
hair
Oh,
mover, a hair mover
sorry.
than anything else. Um, and also,
Last,
you know, the dancers have to play with their own costumes or whatever it is. They, you know, so their hand is up, they let it go. So you can be shooting that moment when the skirt is falling and it looks like movement, but she's just let the skirt drop.
yeah, sometimes gravity will give some movement. One more question about this image. What color backdrop is this? Is it paper?
It's a black, if I can recall correctly, it's just a black backdrop.
Okay. And then the light is kind of creating that gradient.
It's the overhead light. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, well, speaking about gravity, I think that's a good time to switch into this next image here.
Yes, he's the same fellow that we showed with the mirrors. So from that dance I mentioned that I was involved in, this was called Held in Australia. This was a signature move where 5 people did these headstands on the stage at certain moments of the dance. So it was the last thing I really wanted to photograph again, having gone around the world photographing those moments as well as others. But I had these styrofoam balls and I had an assistant on each side and they were just chucking it in, although Paul reminds me, he too, being on his head, threw a ball. So we had 3 people throwing the balls in and I'm taking the picture. And I had no intention. I mean, again, I don't know what made me think of it. I didn't, you know, realize it would have the connotation that it has, which I love, which is, you know, about gravity and all that. And then we were lucky, I think, with the lighting, because again, it was just this overhead light, but it gives those styrofoam balls a planetary feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that they're half lit by the sun and half by the moon. And you know, they're real moments. And this is, you know, what Ron mentioned, and I love that these things really happened. Anyone can retouch them, right? I mean, you can put a million things in, same with the one we just saw, a page with the glitter. But for me, it's so important that this is something beneath the threshold of human perception and can only exist as a photograph. This moment will last forever, but it really happened. Had you been there, you wouldn't have been able to see it because it happened too fast, but it's reality. And I just love that, you know.
Yeah. And that's kind of classic photography too, you know.
Plastic?
It's like classic photography. It's proof of one moment that never will happen again or never happened before.
Yeah, yeah. That's what makes it fun. You know, I go back to the kindergarten thing. This is just fun.
True.
This, we don't know how the hell this happened. He doesn't even know how he did it. We never figured it out, but this is a slightly different lighting, which is obvious, but I threw it in the series anyway. And I had this wonderfully thin, translucent, almost animal-like fabric with the dots and everything. And what he did actually is in no way related to the dance company that he performs with. And he just spun himself around. I don't know what to say. I have no answer. The light was not exactly what it was in the other series. This was obviously hitting more on the black. Well, I don't know, it was a black backdrop looking at it now. But anyway, it was hitting more on the backdrop.
And was there like somebody up on a ladder over here to the side holding one end of
No, you could see he's holding it with his hands.
So he's done all that by himself. That's crazy.
Yeah, so we gave it to him and he's both turning his body and twirling his thing. And
was there a fan?
No.
No fan, wow.
I can't swear to that. I can't swear to that, but I don't think a fan would have allowed for the twirls. And he's twirling.
Yeah, yeah.
See, the fan goes unidirectional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we photographers can't live without our fans, but I mean, our air fans. Yeah. So that's what's so fun about this. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't ask for anything. We get this miracle thing, and it's there forever.
It is indeed,
Yeah.
especially in your books.
What?
Especially in your books. Okay, let's move along.
So this fellow from the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, I don't know how, this is from the 1-to-1 series. And again, we have all this collection of fabric. I don't remember 100%. He's clearly still. He has not been moving. And he's thrown some of the wings, so to speak, of this red fabric. And there may or may not have been a little fan.
How long is that fabric, and is it like just 5 feet wide, which is kind of normal for these things?
I would say an
Allison,
average.
you may know the answer to
I'm
that.
sorry, what?
I was just saying that Allison might know the answer to that.
Yeah. 4 feet sounds right, Allison. What do you think?
For the width of what?
Of
Well,
the
much of the material that you guys are using here, you know, it's going to be like 4 to 5 feet wide, but how long is that? Because the longer it is, the harder it is to control, but that just seems like a huge amount of fabric. And
It depends on the piece of fabric we're using on set. Some of them are like 10 feet long. Some of them are like 20 feet long. It have multiple tails. It really just depends.
Yeah.
Fabric Lois finds.
And this is a meshy one. I don't even remember.
I was on set for this shoot and there were 4 of us handling the fabric on the side with Sean throwing it as well. It was it was a lot.
So 2 people were on ladders, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is interesting then, because anything on a ladder is coming down and everything thrown is going up. So we're going up and we're going down.
Right.
Mm.
That's a transitionary moment.
And I think he was relatively still. Oh, I guess not. I don't, you know, as the shooter, I don't always remember. You know, I'm just so busy shooting.
Right.
You had him moving. He was like changing his shape on the floor every once in a while. So it wasn't completely static.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We actually have a couple of questions about the floor. People are asking, how is the floor reflective? And is it a suspended floor or Marley mats?
It's just covering on wood. Marley would not have any reflective help. So.
Okay. Yeah, somebody's asking if it's like painted with semi-gloss white.
It's not painted with semi-gloss white. No.
Huh.
I don't know how to really describe it.
So it's not a paint effect. It's not a glass floor though.
It's not a glass floor, no. And I think, you know, the reflection obviously is also coming from this one overhead light.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I love about the overhead light, that it gives you the modulation of all kinds of tones, and things can recede into the darkness and come
And when
from the darkness, and it gives a more three-dimensional quality, I think, than it would have had otherwise.
so you're letting in some ambient light, is that correct? Or would this be completely dark without the light?
There's no ambient light.
Okay.
Allison can correct me because I'm more like in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, there's no ambient light in this. It's just the one light head.
Which is also aimed on his face, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. So where the dancer is going to get the premium light, which you'll see in the next one, which I already see on the side. And everything else will be either equally light or going into the shadows, which gives it a sculptural three-dimensionality, I think.
Anna is asking about the overhead light setup. Is there a modifier? What's the height? What's the distance from the backdrop? What's the position?
Allison, I know better. What do you think? 3 or 4 feet from the backdrop, totally overhead, but which we move a little bit. I mean, if someone's shorter or taller or traveling one way or the other, I mean, it's not permanent. And then it's
and any modifier?
I don't
The
think so.
softbox up there? Or?
I'm trying to even think of the name of the thing, but I don't recall it because I'm not that interested.
It's a beauty dish.
Beauty dish? Okay.
but sometimes it changes. We kind of like mix it up based on the scenario, and it can get tilted either forward or backward depending on where the dancer is, like Lois was saying.
Yeah, it's more or less the same, but given their position or whatever, we move it a little. And it just has, but there's a constancy of value of light and the perimeter and where the light is hitting. So obviously it's a little different, but.
One more technical question on the overhead light. Somebody's asking, are you using a boom for the light or do you have a ceiling mount?
No, we're using a boom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. On to the next image.
Well, we've got the same set and a mosquito netting thing that I got online. I guess people should ask me questions because it's just in a moment in time. She's throwing it. She's.
Who is this dancer?
This dancer, Natalie Darren, was also an intern with me, and she's also a filmmaker. She does a million things. She's incredibly talented, and I've shot her a lot. She appears a lot in my books because she's just like a wild horse. No, horse is the wrong thing. I take that back. She's just like a wild force, a wild spirit that you can't control. I mean, there's no way I could have said to her, "Oh, hold your hand this way, do this or that." I mean, because she comes with with such force and such energy. She's absolutely unique and super special, and I'm very grateful to her for her talent and for all the help, that she's given us as well. This, I could point out, we were talking about, I was mentioning timing before. The fact that her hair is going up harkens back to my old days because she's obviously landing. And I love that. I mean, I didn't set up anything here. It's just like really, and again, there's no motor drive. It's still crank, all the time. But if someone has questions, I could answer them. Or if Allison, you want to say something?
I do have a lot of questions queued up in general.
Okay, let's go.
Let's hold off on those, Max. Let's go ahead and get through these next couple of pictures, and then we can switch over to some of those questions. So here's another one. Okay, the same thing, and this is pretty simple. This was one of the blind dates I had with a dancer I had never worked with before. And I basically had an assistant on each side with string, and they were going up and down with the string. And what I had nothing in mind. I mean, why I think of it, I have no idea. I don't preconceive what something should look like and then try to execute it. She's just doing it. And I love the fact that, again, this one light fades everything away. So you kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but the fading away gives, I don't know, I'm still fumbling for words here, but there is a kind of sense of, I don't know, I'll just talk about the strings. So I had no intention, of course, I don't know why exactly. I was just probably trying to get some pattern going. But the result was, to me, she looks like she's playing an instrument. So it became a whole musical thing that I hadn't intended. But I think when I choose the version of a series that I like, it's because it does connote something like this. You know what I mean? It's not just, oh, it's a pretty picture, but there's some magical meaning, or meaning is the wrong word. There's no meaning to any of this, but there's some kind of magical moment. I'll call it a magical moment. Okay, let's switch over to this one now. All right, this is a different series. Obviously, it's different lighting, and with two dancers. Actually, they're acrobats, and they were with Cirque du Soleil, and they're gymnasts, and they do all kinds of things. And I worked with them for a while, and they came with these costumes, which are tubes, and we just basically experimented. I mean, it's great when you're not on assignment, like I, am a lot of the time, and you're just collaborating with the dancer. So again, I really had no idea what was what, and that was it. Fiddle around. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. Obviously, I had someone pulling the white fabric, off screen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely striking with that contrast.
And I'm playing off them. I mean, actually, because of their, as I said, they were Cirque du Soleil, their acrobats and all this stuff. They really brought that to me. So it wasn't like, oh, improvise, do whatever you want. They brought it to me, and then I kind of reshaped it, which is
Yeah, it definitely has a circus feeling.
Yeah. The two interesting ways of working. Someone brings you their talent and their point of view, and you sculpt it and mold it as you want. And the other is they don't, and you create it through working with them.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay, we have this last image here before we take some other questions.
This one is not one I'm the most fond of, but everyone likes it. So, what I do like about it is the imaginary gust of wind that's making the orange. It was a hammock. I actually bought it. I was coming back from Belize, and it was in the airport, lounge, and I just bought it. And I figured I don't buy anything to use. I just buy things to collect as props. And so I don't have much to say about it. I know everyone loves it, and she's one of my favorite dancers who I've worked with since she's 14. But that's it. She was just like tangled up in it. And I'm sure we had a fan going from the viewer's right. Mm-hmm. And
okay.
Actually, we have one question. I think it was for the last image, but I think it applies to all of these. Denise is let's see. No, Nancy's asking, where do you get a background that big? And of course, you get a background that big at B&H. Sorry, I had to do a little plug there. No, but yeah, I mean, how big are these backgrounds that you're using?
Oh, well, I've had just accumulate a lot of different backdrops over the years. One was a mesh thing that was a theatrical backdrop. I had that in black and white. This is, I think, paper. Allison, isn't it paper?
It's not paper, it's fabric, but it's also kind of like a theatrical backdrop.
So it's the theatrical one that I've had forever, but I can't tell you why it looks flat then, because the backdrop did have the little holes in it and all, but it's the lighting, I guess. It just, by keeping the lighting off the background for the most part.
Anna's asking,
what is that? The most technical. Not technical.
Anna's asking, what does that mean, theatrical backdrop?
So backdrop that you would see in a theater scenario, like a scrim or like a cyc, a fabric cyc. Okay. Lois kind of keeps those around because they're great for big group shots for dance photos. And we kind of just use them interchangeably in the studio.
And how big are these getting?
A scrim is what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, a scrim. And how big are these getting?
One of them that we have is like 16 feet tall by 22 feet wide.
Okay, yeah.
But they sometimes they're smaller. It really just depends on what one we use.
Cool.
And we're like 30 feet across. And I'm way back, by the way. I'm usually with, I could be with 120 lens.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Good to know.
Which will be different on everyone's camera and all that.
And this is with a medium format camera or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that translates to about 100 in full frame, something like that?
100 and what?
Like 100 millimeter on a full frame camera. I think that's the max.
It's roughly the equivalent, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Any photographer trying to set this up will find the best relationship, between, obviously each lens gives it a slightly different perspective. So we go by that often.
Sure. Cool. Well, so I guess those images are finished and we have a lot of questions. So yeah, I hope we have a few more minutes. I've been making a queue, so I'll go from the top if that's all right.
Yep.
Okay. I actually, on the top of this, I quoted you, try anything, that's my method. I love that. I'm going to keep that. It's just a great philosophy for any sort of artistic approach.
It works.
Yeah, try anything. I love that. Okay, so Lisa asks, Coming from a journalist background, that's Lisa as well, did you feel like you had to train yourself to see dance, the proper form, the terminology, and all of the dance lingo in order to really pursue it more fully?
No, no. To this day, I still don't know all the lingo.
Okay.
I was, people assume I had been a dancer, and it's not true, but I do like to dance, but I never wanted to be a dancer.
Okay, you focused on being
Which
a
is good,
photographer.
because then I have a distance between it, because the dancers are so damn, worried about every little thing that is not so important in photography. They're just, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, almost kind of keeping that separation as a benefit. Like if you got really too technical, then it might make it too heady instead of more playful, like you said. Okay, Jerry asks, do you feel that the advent of digital photography and the ability for dancers to see themselves right away has helped the process, or giving everybody immediate gratification?
Oh, I think it's been fabulous. I mean, in the old days, of course, we took a Polaroid, making sure basically that the dancers would not be off the set, so to speak. And we looked at the Polaroid, and actually we could tell quite a bit from it. But now there's nothing beats bringing the dancer over to the monitor, because they don't know what they look like. They know what it feels like to do what they did. But again, it's usually the expression we're working with, the hand gestures, and it's an incredible technique. I would not have, for all the dance photographers listening, I would say you have to have some kind of monitor. You could obviously look at your phone, but it's not going to give you all the details. So it would be great to have a monitor. And the dancers, then they need the monitor the way dancers would practice in front of a mirror.
Yeah. Is it a big monitor too, where you can see a lot of detail?
Yeah, well, we blow it up.
Nice.
I mean, I don't have to tell you, you push it.
Sure. Yeah, like most studios.
It's as big as you want.
Sure. Drew asks, how do you balance shooting commercial work versus shooting artistic work just for you?
It's fine. It is a nice balance. I mean, actually, I was shooting commercial work from when I started, and I was lucky that the commercial work I got, like there was one very well-known thing for Rain and Wild watches, and most people hired me to use dancers to create metaphoric, meanings for their products. So that's just a dream thing. I could take pictures that ended up, in my collection anyway, and work with dancers I've worked with, and still convey a message.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great situation. Getting more into the business side, here's a couple of questions on that. Dancers have no money. So how do you make a living? Oh, right. Like if you're kind of, knowing what to charge dancers if some have no money or they want to do it for free.
Yeah.
In other words, is a lot of this like more personal work that's like personal project, shall we say, that's just for artistic expression for you, or how does that work?
Well, I do both. I have commercial work. I have dance companies that hire me, and I have what you've just seen, which is all personal work. I mean, I don't pay the dancers. I'm not paid, and it's just art, and everyone benefits in some way by it. All the prices for everything are going down, Could repeat exactly the question so I could.
I think you answered that one, but the follow-up is, do you pay the dancers, which you just answered, and do you pay photo assistants?
Do I pay the assistants?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I pay my studio staff, of course. The dancers generally are not paid. It's a collaborative thing, which is seen as a benefit to all. I'm not saying there, but in terms of, I know from, talking to all the participants in the workshops that we give, every year, a lot of them want to get into some dance facility or school or a dance company and shoot pictures of the dancers. And they should be paid for that.
Sure.
But yeah.
Okay.
If someone has a more detailed question with regard to that, I'm just being honest about how I work. But actually, the most important thing to tell anyone is to go with a release. That we don't shoot until the releases are signed. God forbid someone hurts themselves, or they decide that, you know, they didn't really want to have this picture taken and they don't look good or whatever. I mean, this is true for all photographers. I mean, you get the release before you even start shooting.
Okay. I'll check to see if there's any follow-ups with that, but on to the next question. Jimmy asks, with all the outfits the dancers come in and with, let's see, how do you stay so innovative to stay up with what's fashionable on today's standards or to be a trendsetter, separating yourself? Do you think much about the fashion behind it?
I think about what looks good in movement. So it could be a gorgeous dress, but I would rather have something where they can, you know, part of their skirt has some fabric they could throw.
Right. Yeah, something could look beautiful, but it's restrictive. So yeah, that doesn't make so much sense.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing, you know, for everyone to try, because the dancers do come with wonderful outfits, and I have them try it on, and there might be something static, like let's say it's a really tight outfit and they can't even really move, but it's gorgeous and we can throw something, you know, so maybe they don't move a lot. Maybe, you know, they just spin and work their arms. But if you want movement, you have to, you know, I think the important thing to just reiterate is you have to test everything you do. So the dancer comes in and the photographer wants to shoot and they have a few outfits. Put on a few outfits. Don't just like, oh, that skirt's pretty and start shooting. Take some like that and then go to, you know, do like a wardrobe, you know, situation where you try different things, and don't just have them stand there holding the thing, but have them move, have them jump, have them whatever, to see how it moves, how the fabric moves, and then will there be transparency vis-a-vis the background light, or, you know, so there's the lighting issue and then there's the movement issue. And you can bring in samples of dance pictures that you like to say, oh, I love this kind of movement, or I love this kind of fabric. And certainly before you invite the dancers in, ask them to bring all their dresses, all their fabrics, all, you know, whatever they have. If they don't have any, they don't have any, which is fine. But it's good to start using from what they have. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Let's see. Another kind of business question. Do you allow the dancers to use your collaborative images to promote their brands and their other ventures?
I would.
Yeah.
I would.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. For example, yeah. I mean, yes. So sometimes dance companies come to me and pay me for taking the shoots for them, and then they can do whatever they want with the pictures. They don't have to pay anything other than the shoot fee they paid. And they get use in perpetuity, which is not maybe the best way to have organized it, but it's fine. You know, I owe so much to the dancers I've worked with, you know, so it's just all giving back and forth. If someone wants me to do something without pay, then I would certainly do that as well, which is different than the commercial world, you know, where you're, yeah.
So when the dancers do this, you know, personal projects with you, and you guys are collaborating on it, you give them JPEGs, and do you give them full resolution JPEGs, or do you give them social media JPEGs? And like, how many would they normally receive from a shoot like that?
It's such a good question. Interestingly enough, this is not a big issue in that the dancers often don't really even ask. Mm-hmm. Certainly if we shoot something, one or two things go up on social media and they get that.
Right.
If any time, at any point in time, a dancer, which happens often, say, can I use X picture for this? We send them the file. Mm-hmm. I can't think of, Allison, are there other things I'm missing here that
usually after the shoot, sometimes we'll send them like a JPEG gallery of the selects. They can't like screenshot it. They can't download the photos. It's only strictly for viewing purposes. and Lois will go through with the dancer sometimes and like pick favorites. And if there's ever a photo a dancer wants for social media, if Lois has already like gone through the process of like vetting it and seeing if she loves it, then we'll give the dancer the social media size JPEG.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And yeah, and I can, this is a repeat, but like I have a yearly calendar and other things, and I don't have to go back to this is so important for everyone to get these things signed. I don't have to go back and ask permission. Can this be used in a calendar? Can this be used in a textbook? You know, yeah. I think everyone shouldn't do anything without getting, you know, any kind of paperwork.
All right. I have one more question from when we were showing the images. Then maybe I'll turn it over to Ron to ask some questions just to keep it balanced. But Drew asks, when you're creating work that you know you're going to sell or make prints of, do you tell the dancer in advance? And how does it work?
No one ever asks. No. I mean, I think there are two things. Dancers are not used to that kind of mentality in a sense, in that I don't know how to, they're happy to be shot, they're happy for the pictures to be used. Interestingly enough, very few really ask for pictures. I mean, maybe Allison, who's also a dancer, can kind of explain that, but you know, you'd think people would be hoarding their pictures. Now, anytime anyone wants something, we do it. I mean, and we send it, and you know, but they don't, you know, and I give them pictures. You know, I don't give everybody things, but I give the main people the pictures. So why is that, Allison, that they don't?
I'm not really sure, but I will say that, like, that question, everything regarding like prints and being used for like calendars and books is in the release that Lois has the dancers sign. So when they sign it, they're reading through the release and they should be able to see that this photograph may be used for the calendar, or it might be used to be sold as a print, or it might be used in like a video or something like that. So they know they're signing that away.
Okay. So it's there on the agreement.
It's a very close relationship I have with all the dancers.
That too.
I mean, I think it's a very special and close relationship. They can trust me, I trust them, and thank God, never been a problem.
I have a question. How much are you balancing people that you've worked with and then blind dates, as you call them? Like, are you usually going towards people you've collaborated with before, or are you often trying out new dancers?
I guess I lean towards those with whom I've collaborated before. And
yeah, you know that it works.
You would think they would run out of ideas, but they don't. You know what I mean? You would think they would be repeating what they did, but they don't. But I am, I'm equally open, I mean, to new people, because a lot of my favorite people now were new people.
Yeah, they have to be new at some point.
Yeah.
Cool. A couple of positive feedback. Felipe says, I saw your show held many years ago in Paris. It was very impressive. Albert says, amazing and beautiful work. So that's great. I'm happy to switch it over to you, Ron, if you want to ask some questions. Otherwise, I can keep on going. I see 22 new messages, so depends on how much time we have.
Yeah, I think we need to just take a look and see if there's just maybe a couple more relevant, you know, questions, and I'll kind of defer to you on that, Max, because you've been kind of like monitoring the questions.
Sure.
So if there's any other like really, you know, like pertinent questions that haven't been asked, like something that's kind of like a little bit different, let's go ahead and do that, and then we can wrap up after that.
You know, in case I forget to say this, we're, you know, very friendly, which you may gather already. So any of the people on this can easily write to us with their question, and it's not a big deal to give an answer. So, I mean, they should feel free, as I would want to. If I were in their position, I had a question, I would want them to answer it, and we're more than happy to answer.
Well, you know, along those same lines, Lois, before I go back to Max with these final couple of questions, you also do, like, I think, mentoring and some workshops, and so maybe you can mention something about that and how people can contact you, you know, if they have an interest in that.
Yeah, well, you go straight to either the website, loisgreenfield.com, or Greenfield studio at loisgreenfield.com. And unfortunately, we had to cancel a workshop because of the pandemic, but we run them a couple times a year. And I think they're, it's just a wonderfully positive thing all around. And I bring in the same dancers that you've seen in these pictures, bring in my favorites. And I sometimes bring in dancers who are highly recommended, but I've never worked with. And there's a good reason for that. The people I've worked with for years and years are already like, you know, perfect to go for the picture. They know exactly what's what. But the dancers who've never been before my camera, you know, that's more the experience that the photographers taking the workshop are going to have. They've never worked together before. So we bring in 50% of talented dancers who've never done that. So, and it's just a very, it's a wonderful experience all around. I love to teach it. I love to share, and then everyone's happy. And I hope the pandemic goes away and we can get back to that. But yeah, everyone should just feel free to write to us. It's our pleasure.
All right, Max, any final questions?
Yeah, let's go with this one last one. It's about the Hasselblad that you're using. So is it fitted with a digital back, or are you using a completely digital or completely manual? What sort of Hasselblad setup do you have?
Okay, so it's the V series, the 500 cm, I think it is. And we put a digital back on the back of it. So I have all the benefits of that camera as well as the digital.
Excellent.
Okay.
I just dropped a link to your website. I'm also going to drop a link to your book on the Amazon site, your book Moving Still, so just so people can see that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Max, I'm going to turn to you for a final comment as well. But Lois, I want to thank you very much for coming in and doing this and sharing your thoughts and ideas and your experience with all of us. It's, you know, some people are writing over here how inspiring it was and how excited they are to try to, you know, utilize some of this knowledge that you just shared with them. So thank you very much for doing that. Max, have you say something, and then we'll wrap up with Lois.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I just want to say that it's been an absolute pleasure to be here today. Yeah, this is very inspiring as far as the actual images and also your approach. Yeah, like that you mentioned mystery, that you mentioned fun and play. And yeah, I just love the combination of kind of the professional, detail-oriented, but then also kind of being open to spontaneity and to see where things go. So yeah, it's been an honor to be here with you today, Lois and Ron.
It's been fun, and I think I recognize some names as they pass along quickly on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, a lot of thank yous.
Yeah, and names that are familiar, so I want to say hi to the people that I know.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Allison, thanks for being in there and helping out as well.
No problem.
So that is it. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you both. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet.
Thanks so much.